Good afternoon. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi is in Moscow for crucial talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin. This visit comes at a critical time as the United States has now joined the military campaign against Iran, striking three major nuclear facilities. Now, US President Donald Trump declared monumental damage while floating concern about the risk of further escalation. While the world awaits Iran's retaliation, any plans, Trump himself floated the possibility for regime change, suggesting the Iranian leadership must make Iran great again or be replaced. As the international community calls for de-escalation, Iran promises a decisive response. Meanwhile, the IAEA warns of serious damage to Iran's nuclear infrastructure and demands access to inspect the sites. What is Iran preparing in response? What would be Russia's role? What are Trump's strategic goals in this conflict with Iran? Welcome to In Depth. Russian President Vladimir Putin told Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi in talks in Moscow that the absolutely unprovoked aggression against Iran has no basis and no justification, adding that Russia is making efforts to assist the Iranian people. Araghchi told Putin that Iran was conducting legitimate self-defense and thanked Russia for condemning the US actions. Araghchi added that Russia is today on the right side of history and international law. Putin and Araghchi made the comments at the start of Kremlin talks and said Russia was ready to help the Iranian people. Now, according to the New York Times, despite President Trump's claim of spectacular military success against Iran's nuclear infrastructure, the strikes were unlikely to deliver a fatal blow to a deeply rooted program that transcends governments. Since the Shah's era, Iran's nuclear ambitions have symbolized national pride, security, and scientific progress. The program has survived revolution, war, sanctions, and assassinations, and is now woven into Iran's identity. Experts argue that any future Iranian regime, even one hostile to the current leadership, would likely maintain a nuclear program. This is according to the New York Times. The US and Israeli strikes may have caused serious setbacks at key sites like Fordow and Natanz, but the technical knowledge and political will behind the program endure. Some analysts warn that the attacks may even reinforce Iran's strategic belief in the need for a nuclear deterrent. As tensions escalate, ordinary Iranians risk bearing the brunt of the geopolitical showdown. Now, for more analysis, we're joined from Cairo by Mr. Mohammad Abadi, researcher in Iranian affairs, and Mr. Mohammad Osman, international relations specialist. Good afternoon to you, both gentlemen, and welcome to In Depth. Here, let me start with Mr. Abadi. And Iran's foreign minister met with the Russian president in Moscow. What do you think are the strategic importance of this visit, and how deep is their alignment in face of the U.S. escalation?
First, greetings to you and to Qnews. Regarding this visit, it comes in a very critical time, especially that Moscow and Tehran have a strategic partnership agreement. It's true that President Putin said that this does not include a joint defense agreement, and we offered to develop the air defenses system to Tehran, but so far there has been cooperation in the intelligence field. the foreign minister of Iran visits Moscow, and the president Vladimir Putin himself receives him. In this sends a message that Iran has alliance to support them, even if this support is not military. But this is a clear message from Russia to the United States that they support Iran in the field of intelligence or politically or diplomatically. And I think also that Iran is in a consultation phase, whether with China or Russia or central other regional countries, before taking a certain step in retaliation for the U.S. strikes, and before taking this very significant, important decisions that will impact the entire world, they have to have these conversations with the Russians, the Turkish, and Egypt and Saudi Arabia now as central regional countries, and now with Moscow, and there, certainly where there will be talks with China, because if Iran works to target the US bases in the region, this will set the Middle East on fire.
Right. Let me here go to Ms. Osman. And Ms. Osman, Putin told Araghchi during his visit that the unprovoked aggression against Iran has no basis and no justifications. But how do you think the Russia, or what would be Russia's role in this crisis, and in which way will it support Iran, given that the U.S.-Russia relations witnessed improvement recently?
Thank you for having me. It seems, just as you just mentioned at the end of your question, that the significant improvement, or the cool down of tensions, rather, between the United States and Russia might actually pave the way for Russia to play a very effective and constructive role in any potential mediation between Iran and the United States, and maybe even Israel by proxy in some way. And I don't think that it is just by chance that Foreign Minister Araghchi is visiting Moscow just to garner support. And when he's received by President Putin himself, not even by Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, means that very certain high-level messages might be conveyed by the Russians from the Americans to the Iranians, it seems. And there might be some sort of Russian mediation in the works in order to cool things down. Because it seems that this conflict, even though it has been going on for about 10 or 11 days, it has already, it's approaching its climax, as it seems. Israel has targeted most of Iran's, or as much of Iran's nuclear and military infrastructure as it could, and it had reached the limits of its capacity. Iran, on the other hand, has also bombarded everything with Israel with its entire capacity, which means that they have reached the peak of their power projection and their use of force. And the United States did not escalate the war further, only intervened briefly to take out these 3 nuclear sites. And they have explicitly said that they have no interest in engaging in an open war with the Iranians. So there's something to work with here. And I think that is what the Russians are working on. However, on the other hand, the Iranians, and let's be very plain and frank about this, Mona, have been let down by the Russians. They have always thought that the Russians are their allies, and that when they are subjected to such a brazen war of aggression, that the Russians will do more to fend off these offensive actions. However, Russia has been rather passive, even though they have condemned Israel, and they have condemned the U.S. They are even proposing a resolution in the UN Security Council along with China and Pakistan. However, it doesn't seem that Russia has increased its military supplies to Iran, for example. It does not even seem that there is a lot of intelligence sharing going on. President Putin even said that the strategic partnership between us and Iran does not include a mutual defense clause, it seems. And it was even rumored that before the war, reports have said that President Putin has conducted a secret phone call to Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, and explicitly warned them that he needs to be more flexible with the Americans in the negotiations, or else he might face an Israeli attack. So it seems that Russia did not do much at this point to support Iran given that Iran supported Russia very heavily in its war with Ukraine by supplying them with those Shahed 136 drones, and even giving Russia the technology to develop these drones domestically, which was one of the game changers in the Ukraine war and made the balance of power tilt back to the favor of Russia. So Russia owes Iran a lot, and Iran owes Russia a lot as well. Russia has supported the nuclear program and also has developed their military capabilities. However, it seems that Russia might need to play a more proactive role. And I believe if the war escalates further and these mediation efforts fail, we might see Russia increasing its support to the Iranian side. And let's not forget that in tandem with Araghchi's visit, we have seen a very strange social media post by Dmitry Medvedev, the deputy chairman of the Security Council of Russia, in which he hinted that if this escalation goes on, Iran might actually develop nuclear weapons, and even third countries might give Iran nuclear weapons. And of course, this is a veiled threat, I believe, because most definitely, if anyone is giving Iran nuclear weapons, it will be an ally of both Iran and Russia, or who knows, even Russia itself.
So I think what what you were saying here, that Russia had a kind of message or a kind of mediating a role more for the time being. If I may go to Mr. Abadi, Iran's foreign minister seems to be seeking diplomatic solutions by visiting Russia today and Turkey yesterday. And we've heard here what Mr. Mohammed Osman said. So is Tehran trying to build an international coalition against US-Israeli aggression, or is it trying to seek a kind of diplomatic solution?
Regarding the international alliance, if Iran was able to build such an alliance, it would have done this before. It took a lot of steps when they signed strategic partnership with China for 25 years. That includes cooperation in all fields: military, diplomacy, security, and trade. And they also signed an agreement 1 month ago with Russia to include the same fields, the facilitations in several fields. But this does not upgrade to being in alliance. The United States is still threatening by President Trump, threatening the BRICS. If they have a special currency, there might be sanctions or 100% tariffs. So talking about an alliance is still too early, but Iran today is only wants coordination with its alliances and the regional powers as the first state harmed by the strikes. They want to coordinate the postures which will lead to Iran to understand its perimeter to exercise the self-defense right due to the Israeli-US strikes on nuclear sites. And today we see Israel striking civilian sites, the television and the electricity facilities. All of this can be interpreted as Israel and the US went to phase 3 of escalation, which is activating the chaos inside Tehran. So Trump's statements yesterday, why would we allow this regime to stay if it's not going to meet our negotiation terms? I think this visit is only for coordination of postures between Iran and its alliances to come up with an appropriate proportionate response.
Well, Mr. Osman, as Ms. Abadi here said, but Trump hinted that he wants a regime change in Iran if the current regime fails to improve the nation. And the White House press secretary reiterated that statement today. However, his vice president, secretary of state, and defense secretary all made public remarks saying that US involvement was only meant to target the nuclear sites and not topple the Iranian regime. What does Trump really want here exactly? What is the cause of those strikes?
I think that a trademark of Mr. Trump throughout this crisis is basically his mind games. He has been playing mind games and brilliantly engaging in psychological warfare against the Iranians since the beginning of the negotiations, it seems. He has fooled the Iranians along with the Israelis, made them fall into a false sense of security, giving them the illusion that he is holding the Israelis back while he was the one, that the United States were the ones who were actually pushing Israel forward and allowing it to carry out this aggression against Iran right after the 60 days ultimatum expired, which was conveyed by President Trump to Khamenei once he came into, shortly after he came into office. And now he is making, again, contradictory statements. He is saying that the explicit position of the United States until a few hours ago was that we are not seeking regime change. That was said by the Vice President, the J.D. Vance, by the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, by Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense. It seems that this was the official position of the United States. However, President Trump surprised us yesterday with his rather amusing post on Truth Social, saying that we need to make Iran great again, Liga, as absurd as that sounds. So, and he is playing with the idea of regime change, and then this being reiterated by the press secretary. So that doesn't mean that President Trump was just having a finger slip while he was texting or posting on social media. So this is very concerning, because if the United States, and by the way, I doubt that the United States is interested in regime change in Iran.
Yes, Mr. Osman, let me here ask you, why are the statements of the American administration or the Secretary of State and the Defense Secretary and those circle, or this circle is different or controversial to Mr. Trump or President Trump's statements? Why are they so controversial and contradict to each other? Why do you think?
As I told you, it's part of this big psychological warfare scheme. It's playing mind games, creating a state of ambiguity, of unclarity. And this, of course, plays with the Iranians' stability. It shakes the Iranians very harshly when he engages in such actions, because now he is giving an impression of unpredictability, telling them that, we're not engaged in, we are not interested in regime change. However, we might be interested in regime change, so that he hopes this will make the Iranians more concerned and thus be more flexible in reaching a ceasefire or reaching any agreement soon to end this war. However, but I still do believe that the Americans are not interested in regime change in Iran. This will have huge ramifications, and it will actually require a very, very long war. It might even require the destruction of the Iranian infrastructure, maybe even the deployment of ground troops. And politically, this would be suicide. President Trump's attempts to engage or sink the United States in a long war against Iran, a war that would lead to the closure of the Straits of Hormuz, or at least the disruption of traffic, maritime traffic over there, that will lead to the skyrocketing of oil prices. Already oil prices have jumped $20 since the beginning of this war. They close Hormuz, they will exceed $100. This will cause global inflation, and this will improve inflation in the United States. So I don't think that President Trump wants that. And this, of course, will completely go against his no wars policy, which is one of the pillars of his MAGA movement, basically. And it will alienate his constituency, making him much more vulnerable. And it might even cost the Republicans the midterm elections in a few months. So I don't think that President Trump is interested in regime change. He's only doing that to scare the Iranians. However, the Israelis, I believe, are interested in regime change, and they are pushing for regime.
This is exactly the point that should be raised here, but I'll get back to you, Mr. Osman, because this is a very important point you raised here. Mr. Abari, the IAEA expects severe damage at Fordow, while reports from Iranian sources say that enriched materials was transferred to other locations before the attack. Has this strike truly set back Iran's nuclear capabilities or just changed the strategy?
Of course, this is a very important question when we talk about the harmed nuclear facilities. Statistics says is that the nuclear program went back 10 to 15 years, as there was a bomb that hit the nuclear facility Fordo that went underground 15 meters. There, many think that the nuclear program is now harmed in Fordo, Natanz, and Asfahan. And of course, Iran, as a ruling regime, if they survive the current strikes, they will take long years to go back to where they were. But where did 400 kilograms of enriched uranium go? This is enough to make a nuclear bomb. Also, a very important point to raise: Iran stated in very important contexts that they transported the enriched uranium and the sensitive equipment before the strike on Fordo. I understand how they would transfer the uranium, but the sensitive equipment, that would have been very difficult because Iran is exposed to an intelligence breach, as the leadership, first row commanders were assassinated, and it's very difficult to miss the information of transporting or transferring these sensitive equipment. In my opinion, regarding the nuclear program, it is severely harmed.
Right, right. Mr. Osman, let me here get back to you and to what we were speaking about, and this is exactly what I meant, that President Trump here was reiterating the stance, or the reported stance, of the Israeli government, while the US administration is reporting its goals. Now, what does this illustrate? And from your point of view, how will Putin balance his action between Iran, Israel, and the US?
I think on a political level, Israel, the Israeli government, they never explicitly also said that they want regime change. What Netanyahu said before is that if this results in regime change, well, it'll be for the best, but he never admitted that this is the expressed goal of the Israeli military operation, because Israel on its own cannot do that. However, on the ground, what the Israelis are doing is indicating that they are attempting to do just that. If we look at the airstrikes on Tehran today, the largest airstrikes that were launched from the Iranian capital since the beginning of the war, what did they target? They targeted the headquarters of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, of the Basij, of security forces. They targeted two prisons. One of them, which houses a lot of political prisoners, hoping that they would be released in order to foment unrest and revolution inside Iran. They also targeted electricity facilities in Tehran. So it seems that they want to create a situation where law and order breaks down in the capital of Iran, hoping that elements of the opposition will move to topple the regime. However, I think this is very unlikely, because what the Israelis are doing has galvanized support for the regime, not out of love for the regime, but out of national pride. Iran is a great nation, whether we like it or not. It is a nation state. It is a country with huge roots in history. They take great pride in their ancient civilization and their identity. So I don't think that they would be welcoming of changing their governments on the other end of a gun's barrel, or rather the other end of an Israeli bomb or rocket. They wouldn't agree to that. However, that's what the Israelis, I think, are trying to do. The Americans, what they are doing is that they are taking advantage of this situation in order to pressure the Israelis, the Iranians further, so that they would be more lenient, because the reports we are hearing right now is that the Israelis are interested in a ceasefire, and that the Americans are interested in a ceasefire, and that the Iranians are the ones who are refusing because they still want to retaliate to the United States and inflict more damage on Israel. So it seems that they want to break the will of the Iranians in this regard. And my final point with regards to Russia, I think that Russia will not intervene very heavily in this war as things stands, unless the Ayatollah is targeted, unless they attempt to topple the government effectively. Maybe then the Russians will try to jump in and issue ultimately dispute both the
Very clear, Mr. Mohammed Osman. That was Mr. Mohammed Osman, International Relations Specialist, and Mr. Mohammed Abadi, Researcher in Iranian Affairs. We thank you so much for those valuable analysis. That concludes today's episode of In Depth. Many thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more coming up on Q News.